Welcome back, Duelist, Casual Duelist here, and I got part 2 of my How to Play Yu-Gi-Oh! Series for those who are just getting into the game or trying to relearn some of it. Maybe you've been out a little while and all the new card types are just a little bit too shiny and we need to know how to break it down. During this portion, during part 2, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to break down all the information that are on the cards themselves. So grabbed a little bit of everything here. The first one I have here is a normal monster. Two ways we know that. One is the coloration of the card itself. Second, it's going to say that down here. We, of course, have the creature's name, or the card's name. Up here, we'll have an attribute. There are 6 different attributes in the game. The 4 base elements, earth, wind, fire, water, and, of course, light and darkness. There is a 7th, but it is reserved for the ancient Egyptian god cards, and those are so niche, they're not really worth mentioning here. The next thing you'll notice is every card seems to have a star level. And I say that because not all of them do anymore. In the main deck, if you have a card that has 4 or less stars, it can be normal summoned without tributing 1 monster card from the field first. 5 and 6 require 1 tribute, 7 and more 2 unless otherwise stated in the card's text. So this guy is a good one. We could just play him straight from the hand anytime we want. Next up, of course, you have your like illustration box, which is cool because they always looked cool back then. This guy's from one of the first few structure decks. Right in here, we're going to find its creature typing. Now, for creature types, I think there were like close to 20 different creature types. And again, just like with the attributing, this could give us beneficial effects. It could be used against us by our opponent's card effects, something like that. As a normal monster, we just end up with a little bit of description text about the character itself. This is not necessary for the game. That's just for you to enjoy. If the card is first edition, nowadays it'll say down here, there's a little square will still be golden. And then you'll have the attack and defense values, and these will be how strong it is in combat, and we will get to that when we actually show like the breakdown of a turn and the combat phase, how those are actually affected. So that is a normal monster. When we compare it to an effect monster, the first thing we notice is the border of the card changes. Instead of being like this yellowish, brownish, we end up with a more red card background. Again, we have the name. We have the attribute. This time it is light instead of earth. We do have a 6-star this time. So to play him, I would need to take 1 monster from my side of the field and move it to the discard pile. This one is a dragon instead of being a beast warrior. We have better stats, as it usually is once you get into the higher level cards. We still have the set number, the card ID, the first edition, whether or not it is. And this time you have an effect. Now this, if I cheat real quick and go through my notes, this would be one of those continuous effects. So this is an effect that while this card is face up on the field, it starts when the monster appears and leaves when the monster is gone. You never have to actually trigger this effect for this effect to happen. Although the second part is a trigger effect. So it has 2 types of effects in there. So they cannot be destroyed by battle with a monster that has the same attack value. That is continuous. The other one is an effect that triggers at a specific time, which is why we call them triggers. And of course it is when this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard. Our effect starts, target 1 monster on the field, return it to the hand. There are ignition effects that you can do yourself. And those are usually like tribute this monster, or in the case of a card I'm going to show in a little bit, we've got this little guy. He says, if we skip to the last sentence, once per turn, you can have the attack and defense of a face-up monster your opponent controls. That would be an example of an ignition. You're choosing when to activate the effect, as opposed to it gets triggered when something happens, or it's continuous. There are also quick effects. And quick effects allow you to do effects during the opponent's turn. And one of those would be our boy Stardust Dragon over here. We'll get to him here in a minute. when a card or effect is activated that would destroy a card or cards on the field. And you'll notice nowadays they do say quick effect there. That's to help you. You contribute this card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. And then it goes into the trigger effect during the end phase. If this was special, or this effect was activated this turn and was not negated, special summon this card from the graveyard. So again, like it could bring itself back, whatever. And it's a mix of a quick and trigger effect. So just to show you the different types of effect and stuff. Next up, we need to go to cards that are in the ritual alignment. Now, with ritual cards, they are blue. And these will also be located in the main deck, along with the normal and effect monsters. Also, your spells and traps. And what really separates them is you need to play a ritual spell in order to get them. So I put a ritual spell in here. They will usually tell you which ritual spell it is. So this one says you need to use White Dragon Ritual. So you're gonna need this in your hand and the spell. You'll play the spell, then go with its effect. So this is used to ritual summon the Paladin of White. Very good. You must also tribute monsters from the hand or field whose total levels equal 4 or more. In order to then special summon it and be considered a ritual summon. So what does that mean? It means that if we activate and then drop one of these from either the field or our hand, we can go ahead and play him. And then we suddenly have the blue card. And again, we're going to have our name, our attribute, our star level, our typing. Ritual will also say it's ritual. Again, the border has changed to a blue card. It does have some effects. Set card ID, set number, attack and defense values, all good. Next up, these are the cards that will be over there in that extra deck area over there where that Blue Eyes is, just slightly off screen. These are fusion monsters. And again, what we've done is we've changed the color of the border. This time they are purple. In order to generate fusion monsters, as long as they are super generic like this guy, it will just tell you the recipe to make them. The part that it leaves out is the spell card. So this guy says Battle Ox and Mystic Horseman. In order to play a fusion monster, you'll need a polymerization spell. And this says fusion summon one fusion monster from the extra deck using monsters from the hand or field, your side of the field in hand, as materials. So if Mystic Horseman is in my hand and Battle Ox is on the field, I can play polymerization, take these two, send them both to the discard pile, and then fuse into playing the Rabid Horseman. And that is a special summon. So again, you could do as many special summons as you want. That's something we're going to cover in the next part. But fusion monsters, again, all the basic stuff. Every card's going to have their name. We got the attribute again. We've got a star level. Now we're going to have, again, typing. It's going to say that it's a fusion. You'll have your recipe of what you need to put together to make it. Again, you're going to have the set number. This one doesn't actually have a card ID. It was used back in the day for the video games. It was a way of putting in your card by putting in the number, and it was usually locked to, like, a number would only work once. And then, of course, you've got your stats with the attack and the defense values. Moving forward, we did eventually get the Synchro Monsters. These would now have a white border, still name, star level, and attribute, still having its typing here. Tells you that it's a synchro, just in case you forgot that's why they're white. And again, it'll tell you if they have effects, as our last monster did not have an effect. It didn't have to say effect. Now, in order to create these, they have another recipe. So this says I need a tuner plus one or more non-tuners. With synchros, what you have to do is you have to combine cards to equal the star level. Now, you can't go over. It has to be exact. So what you need tuners and non-tuners. So in the main deck, you will have some cards that will actually have tuner where it normally says effect. Now, we all know that Gale is still an effect monster because of his border, but specifically this effect monster is also a tuner. And in the instance of using this in Cyber Dragon, that's going to equal 8 stars. These cards need to all be on the field. There is no from the hand and field for this. And this was a good 5-year portion of the game, and when these guys came out, they were fantastic. And it was all about combining star levels. And again, these go in with the fusions. After that, we got the Xyz Monsters, which shook things up one more time. So again, what we're going to have now, you'll notice that the stars have switched sides. They are now on the left hand. So it's now considered a name, an attribute, and now a rank. Ranks are the absence of levels. So some cards that do affect monsters of a certain level will not affect this card at all. Of course, that means that anything that would increase power based on having levels will also not affect this card. These are still have their typing down here. So Warrior, this is an Xyz and an effect. And the recipe is 2 level 4s. Now, the way that we're going to make these guys is from the field. So let's get Battle Ox and Mystic Horseman back on the field. Excuse me. And let's just say they've been sitting there. So in order to generate an Xyz monster, we have to do what's called overlay. So we look at the recipe one more time. 2 level 4s. Very basic. That's why I chose this one today. Again, it gets incrementally more difficult based on archetypes and creature typing, attributes, all sorts of crazy fun. But these guys, both being a 4-star creature, I'm allowed to stack the 2 cards, and then we special summon our card on top of them. So that's how we're going to be able to play him. And again, that is a special summon. That is a proper Xyz summon. And then, again, we still have the stats. We still have the card code, the set number. This one's a little bit older. You'll notice the first edition jumped up underneath the illustration box. And now with the effects of these, we detach materials. So these materials are no longer considered on the field. They are considered in a state of limbo that is not the banishment. So any effects that would activate, like from field to grave, or when this is sent from field to graveyard, do not activate when they're being used as material for Xyz monsters. And that's very important because they are technically not on the field. They are a resource system now. This guy, very basic. When any player's monster declares an attack, we can detach 1 material from this, negate the attack, and then when this card is targeted for an attack while it has no materials, it is immediately destroyed by its own effect. So it does have a trigger, and technically the other one is a quick effect because it can be used during the battle phases. And again, I'm not sure, but maybe this one was printed before everything started getting quick effect, and it might have just been considered a multi-trigger because that used to be the wording for that. And again, so your opponent attacks, you can send 1 card from it to the discard pile, and now you've stopped that attack. So these are very cool, very useful, and very fast to be able to use. After those came out, we got something called Pendulums. Now, technically, these belong in the main deck, but also technically they can be anywhere. So what makes these cards so special is they are half monster and then half spell, which is why the bottom half of these cards is always going to be green, and the top half will be for wherever they're supposed to be. So this guy is Zortless. He is a fusion and also a pendulum, while Metal Foe's Vanisher is just an effect monster pendulum. So this one will be in the main deck. This one will be in our extra deck with our other cards. And there's 2 ways to play them. So we can play them as a monster, at which point this guy would be 2 tributes. And this guy needs to be a fusion of 1 Metal Foe's monster and a fusion monster. And again, you can use good old polymerization to do that. However, especially when it comes to some of the newer decks into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the monsters themselves, the different archetypes, actually have their own fusion spells that work like polymerization, and you can use them in combination with polymerization. So you actually can fuse more rapidly. But you can choose whether or not to play these in one of 2 spaces. So they can either be played normally like a monster, or remember our deck is this next zone over here. We'll just put a placeholder there. The furthest two spell trap zones, again, one would be off camera here to the left a little bit, but we're just going to use these two for giggles right now. We can play them into the spell trap zones in the corners because those are also our pendulum zones nowadays. And what that does is they will take just this top box of effect text here and also this number. It does not matter left or right. They're still a 1 regardless of where they are. I think it was a missed concept. I really do think that they should have had some that had a different number for each side, but that would have been too complicated. The basic thing is they will activate as a spell and have the following effects, whatever their effect is. This one says, if a monster or monsters you control is destroyed by card effect, except the damage stage, you can add 1 metal foes card from your graveyard to the hand, except Vanisher, and use the effect only once per turn. And that's fine if you're playing that deck. But the real thing is, if we put him there, and we were able to place this one in another zone, we now have 1 and an 8 in our pendulum zones. And this is another way of causing a special summon. On my channel, I do not believe that I've actually played any pendulum builds yet outside of double triple Ds maybe. So that one might be good to see about it. But what's going to happen is you take the scale numbers of 1 and 8, and now every number between those two numbers, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I can now special summon from my hand any monsters that are within that range. So let's just take this. If this was my hand, these 5 cards, the Blue Eyes White Dragons could not be summoned because they are 8, but the 2 4s can, and they can be special summoned at the same time. And the other rule is when these cards go to the discard pile, they go on the top of your extra deck face up. And the reason for that is they can actually be replayed through another pendulum scale and be special summoned from the top of the extra deck that way. Now, when they will have to reside in one of these 2 extra deck zones, or these extra monster zones, unless you have a link monster pointing out, at which point they can then be played to the arrow points in the main zone. From the hand, any of the main zones, from the top of the extra deck, the extra zone, or a zone being pointed to by a link monster. Very important. That is something that did change, actually that stayed the same when we went to Master Rule 5. So next up are the link monsters. So in order to generate these, you'll notice that the rank is gone, and so is the level. We still have our name, we have our attribute, we have our type, we know that it's a link, we know it's an effect. The border has changed to a blue honeycombed out hexagonal pattern. We only have an attack value with no defense value. What that's going to tell you right off the rip, these cards can only ever be summoned in face-up attack position because they have no defense position. Some cards, like a Book of Moon that I'm very fond of, Book of Moon normally would put a monster in face-down defense position, could never target a link monster because they could not be face-down defense. And then what you do is you're going to make their recipe. So this says 2+ effect monsters up to the link rating, which is down here where the defense was. So this is a link 3, which is why we know we have 3 arrows. Those arrows are where, again, if this guy is up in that extra zone, we could play these to the 2 zones behind him that it's being pointed to. How do we make this character? 2+ effect monsters. So generally, you're going to need 3 monsters with effects. You'll send them to the discard pile. In this case, these 2 would go to the top of the extra deck. And then what you'll do is you'll summon this card. Additionally, if you're going to use a link monster for a link summon of another link monster, you have 2 options. You can use them as a single because it is 1 monster card, or you can use them for their link rating. So again, this guy can either be used as a 1 or a 3. Very cool. Moving over to the spells, the rest of the stuff that's in the main deck. Most spells are only able to be activated on your own turn. However, you may set them face down to save for later, rather than keeping them in your hand. This is an example of a normal spell. It just says spell. There's no symbol. All you do is you play the card and resolve the effects. In this case, it has a cost. You discard a card, and for the remainder of the turn, you reduce the levels of all monsters in your hand by 2, even after they're summoned. That's fine. This one is a continuous spell, so when played, this one will stay on the field rather than being played and moving directly to the discard pile. This one will stay on the field. And we know it's continuous because of the infinity symbol. And again, play it, activate its effect, and just keep it going. The Mask of Brutality here is what we know as an equip card. This is the symbol, sort of like a little plus sign, almost looks like an old school shield. When you play these, you equip a monster. Generally, it will say something about what happens to the equipped monster. In this case, that monster will gain 1,000 attack and lose 1,000 defense value. So let's just grab the closest card. That means this guy goes to 4,000 by 1,500. And you either pay 100 life points during your standby phases, or you destroy this card. So it's got a little bit of a cost to it. The mountain here is an example of the field spell. And now the difference here is that's actually supposed to look like a compass rose. And again, that's how we know that this one is going to be played in that upper left right above our extra deck. And then, of course, the effect will blanket apply to the entire field. And the ritual spell, the last type of spell. No, not the last type of spell. Ritual spell looks like a little fire emblem there. And again, these are just used to play the ritual monsters. And then quick play, the last type of spell. We know it's a quick play because it has a lightning bolt emblem. Quick play are different. These can be activated anytime during your own turn, even though most spells are a spell speed 1, as are most monster effects. The only monster effect being a spell speed 2 would be a multi-trigger or a trigger effect, quick effect. So multi-trigger and quick effects, depending on when you played the game last. And these can be set like trap cards. Normally a trap needs to be set face down for a whole turn. So, I set it, I end my turn, and on my opponent's turn, I can activate it if I want to. That's how you can do with quick plays as well. They do help you surprise the opponent, but again, at any point during my own turn, as long as I have an open area to play it to, I can immediately just drop it. Moving over to the traps, we have a normal trap card. No additional symbols. You flip it after you set it, perform the effect, and send it to the discard pile. Continuous, again, stays on the field until it's either destroyed or the effect takes it off the field. In this case, you paralyze a monster on the field, can't change its attack position or declare attacks. And of course, if the monster is destroyed, you destroy this as well. And then counter traps. This is the highest speed in the game. Nothing responds to these except same types of cards. You will know these because these will have an arrow that's sort of pointing backwards, sort of like go back and undo that action. And again, you read the effect to figure out what your timing is. This one, when an opponent's monster declares an attack, target the attacking monster, negate its attack, and then end the entire battle phase. So that is every card type that is currently in Yu-Gi-Oh! In March 2021. Sorry that this one went so long. Some of these will. But I do hope this has helped somebody, a couple somebodies, maybe multiple people. And I'll see you guys with part 3. And in part 3, we're going to go over more of the how to play and actually diagram out how a turn works. So I will see you guys then.